Let's dig into this. Picture it. It's late summer.
Yeah.
That quiet hum of a laminator.
Oh, yeah.
The really satisfying click of a staple gun.
Yeah.
You know the scene? A teacher probably standing on a chair, carefully putting up those bright letters.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the big shopping trip, right? Target, maybe Lakeshore Learning, the dollar store.
Yeah.
Grabbing all these supplies.
It's this huge effort to transform, a pretty sterile room into this welcoming learning space.
Absolutely. It's definitely, well, it feels like a real act of love.
Yeah.
And like you said, often unpaid professional labor, too.
It really is. Teachers are spending their own money, using those last precious days of summer, basically sculpting these environments for their students.
They're trying to build a haven, send that message, hey, I care. I built this place for you.
Exactly. But, and this is the interesting part we're getting into, that whole loving effort, it kind of rests on an idea we don't often stop to question.
Which is?
That the classroom is fundamentally the teacher's space, their domain to design and manage.
Right. The teacher curates it all. But here's the core question we're exploring today, isn't it? What if? What if the best learning spaces aren't the ones teachers build for students, but the ones they build with them?
Exactly. And this isn't just, about wall colors or furniture. It goes much deeper.
How so?
Well, it connects directly to things like how engaged students feel, to equity in the classroom, and even to how our brains actually handle learning something called cognitive load.
Okay, cognitive load. We'll definitely unpack that.
Yeah. So this whole deep dive is really about looking at that shift from a space the teacher owns to a place the community owns, and why that might be, honestly, some of the most important work schools can do.
So a fundamental shift in thinking.
Yeah.
Where do we start unpacking that? Maybe with a traditional model.
Makes sense. Let's talk about the traditional classroom first.
Yeah.
There's this concept in educational research called teacher territoriality.
Territoriality, okay.
Yeah. It's this idea that the classroom is seen often implicitly as the teacher's private turf. And, school design, how rooms are assigned, it all kind of reinforces that.
The teacher's responsible for that room. Their name's on the door.
Precisely. And the layout, the rules, everything often reflects that one person's control. Now, what's really fascinating is the power dynamic this sets up. It's subtle, but it's there.
What kind of dynamic?
Students basically learn, without anyone saying it explicitly, that their role is, well, it's kind of like being a guest.
A guest in the learning space?
Yeah. They have to adapt to an environment that wasn't really built with them in mind. It might be perfectly nice, but it might not fit their needs or how they feel comfortable.
And even if it feels safe and predictable, which it often does.
Right, there are benefits. But it can also put up these sort of invisible walls between the student and the space itself.
Invisible walls?
Yeah.
Can you give us a sense of what that feels like for a student day to day?
Sure. Imagine walking into a room every day where you feel like you're in someone else's house. You're always kind of checking. Am I following the rules? Is my stuff in the right place? Is this okay?
You're constantly monitoring yourself against the environment.
Exactly. It's not necessarily hostile or anything, but a little bit of your mental energy, your focus, is always going towards navigating those house rules, spoken or unspoken.
Okay, I can see that. So how does that start to change? You mentioned something about digital spaces.
Right. This is where it gets really hopeful, I think. There's this sort of quiet revolution happening, especially online. Take Conduit Academy. It's a persistent virtual school designed for students who learn differently.
Okay, Conduit Academy.
So in one of their virtual classes, they had this Canva slide deck. It was basically the visual background, the walls of their online classroom. Teacher made.
Functional, I'm guessing?
Functional, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe a bit generic, uninspired. It did the job, but that was about it.
And then came the revolution.
A very quiet one. 2 students just went to their teacher and asked, basically, hey, can we make a new one?
Wow. Just like that.
Just like that. And the teacher said yes. And the new deck they designed together. That's the one the whole class uses now.
That's really powerful in its simplicity, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just asking the question.
It is. And it unlocks so much more than just, a nicer looking slide deck.
Right. It feels like we're touching on something fundamental here about control, maybe.
Yeah.
Or participation.
Absolutely. What those students demonstrated is what we call student agency. It's that capacity kids have to act independently to make real choices about their own learning.
Agency. Okay.
And the science of learning is super clear on this. When students have agency, when they feel they have some say, it's a massive catalyst. Engagement goes up. They process things more deeply.
They shift from just receiving information
to being active architects. They're building their own understanding. It's a huge shift.
And their work on the slide deck, that redesign effort,
Hmm.
how does that connect to the cognitive load idea you mentioned earlier?
Perfect connection. This ties into something called germane cognitive load. Now, load sounds bad, but this is the good kind.
The good kind of mental effort.
Exactly. It's the desirable mental work that actually builds real understanding, creates those lasting connections in the brain, and gives you that sense of ownership.
So when the students redesigned their virtual wall,
They weren't just decorating, they were investing mental effort in their own learning process. They were making the space make sense for them. And that investment makes the space more meaningful, not just for them, but for everyone. That's germane load in action, hard mental work that pays off.
okay, so we have agency students making choices and germane load the useful effort of building understanding. How do these link back to the idea of who owns the space?
This is the critical link. Let's bring in cognitive load theory more broadly. We've touched on it before, but the core idea is pretty simple. Our working memory is limited.
Right, you can only juggle so much at once.
Exactly. So, for learning to be effective, we need to minimize the unnecessary mental work, the stuff that gets in the way. That's called extraneous cognitive load.
Extraneous load. The mental clutter.
Pretty much. It's the effort spent just trying to figure out the task or navigate the environment or deal with confusing instructions, anything that isn't actually learning the content.
So let's apply that to the traditional teacher-owned classroom we talked about earlier. Where's the extraneous load there?
Well, think back to that feeling of being a guest. There is a mental tax involved, right?
How so?
Constantly self-monitoring your behavior to fit those unspoken rules. Maybe feeling a little bit of low-level social anxiety. Am I doing this right? Is this okay? That feeling of being slightly out of place, like you're in someone else's territory.
That definitely uses up mental bandwidth.
It does. And even the physical environment itself. If it's too cluttered or too stark or just doesn't match a student's sensory needs or how they organize things, that mismatch becomes a source of distraction. It adds to the extraneous load.
So just being in that space, trying to fit in or make sense of it when it wasn't designed with you in mind, can actually make learning harder because it drains your mental resources.
That's the core idea. Your brain is busy dealing with the friction of the environment instead of focusing purely on the learning task.
Okay. So now contrast that with the Conduit Academy students redesigning their digital space. How did that change the cognitive load picture?
Dramatically. By taking ownership, by investing that germane load up front in the redesign. They essentially reduced the extraneous load for everyone moving forward.
How did it reduce it?
Because the environment became more predictable for them. It was more representative of the group, not just the teacher. It felt psychologically safer, more comfortable, because it was theirs. They helped build it.
So the mental energy they might have previously spent navigating or feeling like a guest or dealing with a design that didn't quite work for them.
All that energy was freed up. It could now be dedicated entirely to the actual learning, to understanding the concepts, to participating in discussions. The friction was reduced.
Learning becomes more efficient, more focused almost.
Yeah.
Easier in a way.
Easier in the sense that you're not wasting energy on things that don't matter for the learning itself. The path is clearer.
And it strikes me that this is maybe easier to achieve in these digital spaces like Conduit. Those walls aren't made of cinder blocks.
That's a crucial point. Persistent virtual platforms show us that digital walls are incredibly malleable. You can change them easily.
Unlike a physical classroom where renovations are a big deal.
Exactly. The tools to actually shape the digital environment, changing a background, designing a slide, reorganizing a shared board like Miro or Jamboard, those tools are often democratized. They're literally in everyone's hands, students included.
It puts the power to shape the space directly with the users of the space.
It does. And this really reframes the teacher's role, doesn't it?
How do you see it changing? It doesn't sound like the teacher becomes less important.
Not at all. In fact, I'd argue it elevates the role. The teacher shifts from being, the sole proprietor of a physical room
The owner and manager.
to becoming the facilitator of a community-built world. They guide the process, provide the tools, foster the collaboration, ensure learning goals are met within this co-created space.
So it's less about controlling the space and more about facilitating the learning within a space everyone feels ownership of?
Precisely. It makes the whole learning process feel more democratic, definitely more engaging for students because they have a stake in it, and ultimately, as the cognitive load theory suggests, potentially much more effective.
It really transforms the entire landscape of learning, moving beyond just the physical constraints.
It really does. It shifts the focus to building a learning community that collectively shapes its own place, a much richer experience for everyone involved.
So reflecting on all this, it really brings us back to that fundamental question. For anyone involved in education or even just learning environments generally, are we focused on building these maybe immaculate, perfectly curated spaces where students are essentially just guests, adapting to our vision?
Or are we providing the tools, the opportunities, and maybe most importantly, the trust for them to become the co-architects, to build their own learning places alongside us?
That's the challenge, isn't it? And thinking beyond the classroom, this idea has wider implications.
Absolutely. It makes you think, doesn't it? What does this shift from authority-owned to community-owned mean in other contexts? Your workplace, community projects you're involved in, even just how you set up your own personal learning space.
Yeah. What kind of walls, literal or metaphorical, do you encounter every day? And maybe more importantly, whose hands hold the tools to reshape them?
That's the provocative thought to chew on. Whose space is it really? And who gets to decide? Something to keep thinking about.